Fantasy season is starting to get going, and we've had a busy week of NFL talking points, so that gives us some fancy relevant talking points as well. Ed, you're going to start us off with something that's not usual for us, and that's talking about a defensive player who is no doubt going to have fancy impact for some QBs.
Indeed, yes. Myles Garrett, there he is. A huge off-season move. That blockbuster trade happened a few days ago. And like you say, it's not often that a defensive player is going to have much impact on fantasy. But when we're looking at Myles Garrett, arguably the greatest defensive player in the game as it stands, I think you have to consider it. I know that the likes of Lamar and Joe Burrow will be breathing a huge sigh of relief. As a Bengals fan, I'm delighted to see Myles Garrett. I haven't got the stats, but I know he's sacked Joey B a lot of times. Obviously, that's Myles Garrett and our poorest O-line at times. But yeah, and so I think that boosts the value of Burrow and Jackson slightly. And whoever the Browns end up as quarterback, more on that later. And conversely, the likes of Brock Purdy, Pestel's friend Sam Darnold, and then who else am I missing? Cardinals,
Brissett,
Jacoby Brissett.
Or Carson Beck.
Or Carson Beck, yeah.
The battle of who's going to be quarterback at Cardinals, suddenly everyone stepped well away from that. And they go, actually, Carson, you're probably ready, mate. In you go.
Yeah. So, I mean, he instantly becomes a problem for them, doesn't he? And those offenses. So I just think it's a big move, obviously, in real life American football. But from a fan's perspective, it's something to be aware of.
So looking last year, 5.5 sacks and 7 tackles against the Ravens in 2 games, 3.5 sacks and 6 tackles against the Bengals in 2 games. They are him individually. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think looking at where you're drafting Burrow and Jackson, I'm not sure you can necessarily take them higher because of that, but it's 2 games they're not having to face Garrett. It's 2 games that they're not going to take a hammering, so arguably could end up being a bit healthier later in the season, not having Garrett breathing down the necks. I think actually it's the other side that has more impact for me, as you mentioned there, the fact that Brissett, Purdy, Darnold are players that I'm not desperately keen to draft anyway, but if you do end up with them, a game against the Rams, you're always considering whether you're going to start them or sit them anyway. This probably makes all 3 of those a big sit in those games. So if you know you're not going to start 2, then that might put other players above them. But we're talking players you're drafting far later, aren't we? So in your 2 QB leagues, that's where it might give you that pause for thought a little bit more as well.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, no mad rush to draft any of those 3 quarterbacks that will now be facing the destroyer of ribs. I wonder how it affects the likes of Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams and Corum as well, to be fair, because you've got to think with a defensive powerhouse like Garrett, is that going to lead to more of a run game once they race out to this lead? And does Puka get quieter as games go on, perhaps? Does he get saved once they race out to a lead? Because you've got to think they are going to be contenders now for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I said to Pestel the other day, I just love the way that the Rams go about things. As soon as they've got a sniff, they go all in. They really go for it. And it worked for them in the past. And I think there's a case for that they do go ahead and it affects the offense.
You think that massive Saquon Barkley here, that came because the Eagles had kind of won early, essentially, and Barkley just got all the work after that. So yeah, that other side of it could be interesting. I think Puka's still going to do massive things, but does it maybe cap his chance of being wide receiver 1? It's certainly a consideration in the mix, isn't it? Talking about wide receivers, though, that takes us to the rest of this week's business, Ed. And obviously, AJ Brown took a lot of the headlines, but a couple of other wide receiver things to keep our eyes on as well.
Yeah, I mean, 3 kind of big stories. I mean, the other blockbuster trade, they kind of came back to back, didn't they, on the same day, was AJ Brown. And, Brown, it is a huge move. Obviously, the Patriots and the Rams, I think, were kind of courting Brown. And He's ended up at the Patriots. So absolutely, clearly going to be wide receiver one under Drake May next year. He moves into his 29th year. There were signs of him starting to not quite be at the peak of his powers last season. But I wonder whether he'll get a new lease of life in New England. And he's certainly got the quarterback and the structure there to do that. So it does boost his value. I think he wasn't getting the opportunities in that Eagles offense to maybe maintain his role as that elite receiver. And I think he will do in New England. And Drake May will certainly benefit from having a top tier receiver there. I just question whether he is slightly on the downturn, and stats might seem to back that up. I don't know what you guys think.
I think when you look, I was just looking back now at his final year in Tennessee. He was QB 32 that year, bounced back straight with QB 6 and then 5. So I think it's definitely an attitude definitely comes into play. Hopefully, if we see less of him pretending to read books and talking about dropping in for fantasy because of his snap count, we might see that. But I think this is where a wide receiver's ego really helps for real life production, fantasy production, because he's going to go out there to prove a point and to prove that he is worth that and to prove that the Eagles should have tried hard, whether he even thinks that way, he was ready to move anyway. But I don't know. I just think for Brown now, I feel we can be confident of a top 10 finish, I think, for fantasy this year. Obviously, Dynasty, we've got the aged factor in. For me, though, this really elevates Drake May. Having him there. So I'd got May and Hurts pretty much 50-50. I'm not sure which should have taken. May is now the clear option for me at that point where I'm taking QB there, because May's now got that bona fide pass catcher there alongside all the other positive traits that we've seen last year. Are you going to be drafting yourself some Brown this year, Mark?
Yeah, more than I have done in the past, to be honest. Especially since Saquon appeared at the Eagles, I just backed away from both AJ and Devonta Smith, to be honest, because it was clear where that work was going. Then when they decided they're just going to pick Hurts up and throw him over the line once they get close enough, I was just out on the Eagles in general. I think the only one I really got shares in was Goddard more than anything. Yeah. This actually strangely elevates me a lot more on Devonta Smith than anything to do with AJ Brown.
Yeah, good point.
But I hate the Eagles. I really hate the Eagles, which is partly why I don't draft them, because I just hate them. I'm not a massive fan of the Patriots either, to be honest, but I don't like the Eagles. But how savvy are them? Didn't they paid like a first and a third round for AJ Brown, and then 4 years later, after a Super Bowl win, they get a first and a fifth back? Yeah, that is some business. If they can come and do some financial management for me, that'd be fantastic, because someone in their office knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I was surprised that they got a first for him, I think it's not a bad trade for the Patriots at all, because that's what they needed. They needed that, and they were willing to pay the premium to get him. But like you say, the Eagles have benefited massively. Moving on to Drake London. Now, Drake London is someone who I've always had a bit of a soft spot for. I know you have, Pesto. You're a huge Drake London fan, and he signed this massive contract in Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta on paper have got the weapons, haven't they? The quarterback situation for me in Atlanta is still, I mean, I'm not a massive Tua fan. I never have been. And there's huge question marks over him for me in terms of form, also the concussion issue as well, and whether you get a full season out of him. Drake London is an elite receiver. He's a great age. He probably deserves the contract. Last year wasn't great. I mean, he struggled. I think he ended up as wide receiver 19, missed a few games through injury. But bear in mind, the season before, where he had a consistent, if not performing, Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball, he was wide receiver 5. So he's got that pedigree. And I think that proved that he can do it. But I'm still hesitant when drafting Drake London, when I think about the quarterback situation in Atlanta, because if it's not, first of all, who it's going to be, it's probably going to start off being Tua. Penix comes back. There are question marks over him as well. So as much as I like London, I'm still a little bit hesitant when drafting him.
Yeah, I've kind of think usually I like to follow the money in situations like this, but as you said, there are lots of weapons in Atlanta, but is anyone competent enough to pull the trigger on those weapons? When I look at some QB camp battles towards the end of the show as well, I'll be talking a little bit more about Tua and Penix, but yeah, I think London. I'd see about wide receiver 8 maybe for redraft this year. Dynasty value is very much going to be attached to that QB room though. Have you got many shares of London anywhere already, Mark, or are you going to be steering clear until that QB situation shakes out?
Yeah, that QB situation, like Tua takes one big hit and it's either lights out, or he just shies away. He goes right back into his shell. You saw it his last season at the Dolphins, where a couple of big hits and then he's mentally out the game. He checks out. He tries to pick a pass way too quickly. He doesn't stop and go through his motions properly. And I mean, as a Bucs fan, I really hope that happens in Atlanta, which is partly why, like, London for me is kind of, he's like, oh yeah, Drake London. He's never fresh in my mind of, oh, I must draft him, until you see him on the board and you go, oh yeah, I forgot London was there. And it's partly because of the division he's in, because we are crap. The loss of us Panthers, Saints, and them. So you've got to think with him, he has the boost of having to play us absolute rubbish teams 6 times, which is going to boost his stats, whether it's Tua or Penix. But it's more a slight on Tua than it is on London. I think people overlook London. Maybe this year they won't, because he's been in the news and because he's had that paycheck. But I think years gone by, he has gone lower than perhaps he deserves. But I won't draft him because he's a Falcon.
Let's finish off with Stefon Diggs. I mean, because we have to, maybe. He hasn't got a home yet. And it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I mean, things to bear in mind with Diggs, he'll be 33 during the season. He's past the peak of his powers. But he had a very solid season. I think it was wide receiver 17 last year, after that disastrous season in Houston. So yeah, he was better last year. Is he a top 10 receiver still? No. Could he be a top 20 receiver? Possibly, but it depends where he ends up. But I mean, I've not seen much kind of news in terms of where he might end up. But he's someone, ever since he threw his toys out of the pram in Buffalo in the second half of that season before he left the Bills, I've been out on. And unless he ends up in the absolutely perfect situation, his age and maybe his attitude a little bit is still telling me to steer clear of him.
When I had a quick Google to see if I find an update before we started recording, I got more information about his relationship with Cardi B than anything to his NFL contract. So that tells me what I need to know. I don't have enough information to consider drafting him in Dynasty or redraft. There'll be a point where you go, yeah, let's see what happens, and throw a dart at him in best ball at the minute. But until I have more news, I think I'm out. That's as much analysis as I have on the Diggs situation. So I'll hand over to you, Mark.
Of these 3 players, I will probably draft Diggs more than any of them, because I'm the bloke who picked up Brady last year just in case. Like, you never know. I had Fournette 2 years after he retired. Like, I will hold out for these heroes coming back. Yeah. Do you know what? The minute he signs for a team, I'm all over him, because it is still Diggs. And I still have the rose-tinted glasses of those Bills days where you came up against him in a week and you think, bugger, that's 30 points to him straight away. If you come up against him with him and Allen, you just fold that week. You're not winning. It was weird what happened in Houston. Like you say, he just sort of fell off a cliff, didn't he? Where the competition was too much for him, whereas at Buffalo, he was like the man. I don't know, but it depends where he goes, I suppose. But I kind of view him as, wherever he goes, he'll be the Mike Evans. So Mike Evans, again, rose-tinted glasses. He is elite. But do I back him to really put up points in San Francisco? I don't know. And it'll be the same with Diggs wherever he goes. I'll draft him just because you never know. But I wouldn't be particularly confident. I'm not going to shout it from the rooftops.
Before we move on, if you have not done so already, please do subscribe, like, and give us a share. We've got fancy content coming to you or other all through the off season, and then our regular shows to kick off in season as well. Mark, up next, you have some fancy bad boys to discuss who have given us quite a lot to talk about so far in the off-season.
Bad boys, what you gonna do? I was going to play the official one, but I mean, my singing's good enough. Rashee Rice, boys. Rashee Rice. He was arrested on the 19th of May in Dallas for violating probation after testing positive for THC. Can you believe it? It was the Mary Jane, the devil's lettuce, boys, the fire ganja. He had it in his system, that sweet Mary Jane. The probation relates to a driving incident, a car crash, if you will. In 2024, he's going 119 miles an hour in his Lambo, making aggressive maneuvers and racing other drivers. He's banned for 6 games. This year, he's missed the OTAs. He's missed the minicamp due to being arrested in May. He's due to be released from the penitentiary on the 16th of June. There's no NFL suspension, and the Chiefs have indicated they don't intend to cut or trade him. But the question is, can you trust him to stay out of trouble? No, is the answer to that question. I do not trust this man at all. I make light of it because it's only a little bit of weed. And over in the States, rules are relaxed over there. The driving thing, yeah, maybe that was a bit more serious. I think he's a troubled man. He is a young man with lots of money that perhaps needs a bit of guidance in life from someone vastly more intelligent than me. When it comes to fantasy, I am not taking the risk, particularly where Rice goes. He goes way too high for the risk attached to that name, in my opinion. I am fully out on Rashee Rice, and I'm happy to lose a week to him scoring 30-odd points because I'm not a risk taker in that sense. I'll put all my money into Diggs instead, just in case.
I think it's one, if fortune favours the brave, I'm not brave enough either, because currently ADP redraft, for what it's worth, around wide receiver 13, and that feels right. Because if he's on the field, he could get you some top 5, top 6 weeks quite comfortably. But he could also disappear, as we've seen, and also not be there at some point as well. And if I'm taking a player as my wide receiver 2, or if you go in QB or RB early and you take him as wide receiver 1, I don't want the variance and risk that he presents at that point. I want something more reliable. So, yeah, I'm agreed. Knee surgery, prison time, big fancy numbers. There's too much variance there, so I am out of that cost.
The other thing is, when I was doing my research, I found out he was arrested both times in Dallas, which says to me he probably lives in Dallas. That's an 8.5-hour drive from Dallas to Arrowhead, and I can't trust someone who's that lackadaisical with their real estate choices.
That's a long distance to get.
That's a long distance.
In trouble.
Exactly, and he's willing to burn his own hole in the ozone layer in jet fuel. I can't trust a man like that.
I think it's interesting what you said about it's like he needs some guidance, isn't it? And because he's got the talent. You look at his stats. Over the last 2 seasons, he's played 12 games, which is obviously nowhere near enough. But in those games, he's averaged 17.9 points per game. So that's wide receiver 1 points. So he's been someone, who gets you big points when he plays, but you just don't know what's going to happen with him. And there's been no sign over the last couple of years that he's getting his house in order at all. He's still making mistakes. He's still making the wrong decision. So, yeah, I'm with both of you. He's someone that's too much of a risk for me.
Yeah, it's his prove it year as well, isn't it? It's last year of his rookie contract.
Yeah, his rookie contract. Yeah.
If you're not playing ball by now, like literally on the pitch and in your real life, if you're not playing by the rules, then what are you doing? You're throwing away, like you say, real talent, fantasy wise, and real life talent. It's a shame.
What about Josh Jacobs? Is he someone you're willing to take more of a punt? I mean, as far as the legal trouble goes, it's a less comfortable conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd like to punt him. If the allegations are true, I will stress that if the allegations are true, sincerely, F Josh Jacobs. Arrested for domestic abuse charges related charges in May 2026. 5 charges that aren't lovely. I won't list them, but they're not very nice. Turned himself in, and he adamantly denies all charges and all allegations. It's still being investigated. He returned to practice, and Matt LaFleur described it as business as usual, which is interesting, but I suppose he's playing the game, isn't he? It's what you're supposed to say. The NFL baseline, even without charges, is a 6-game ban for domestic abuse, which is mental that is even a rule that exists. Why do you even need to put that in your rule book, that there's a set? Yeah. That's nuts. There is a problem in the NFL with things of this nature. Can your trust still be there at the end of the season? Probably, because there's a problem in the NFL with things of this nature. And knowing the NFL, like I know the NFL, it'll probably just be fine in terms of Josh Jacobs and whether he plays or not. And will anything happen? I don't trust the NFL. If it's proven to be true, I don't trust the NFL to make the right decision unless the law step in and make that decision on their behalf and he gets physically taken out of society for a short period of time. I wouldn't draft him just on principle alone, to be honest. I don't care how many points he scores. If it's proven to be true, if it's proven not to be true, I will eat all these words and change my mind. Focusing purely on fantasy and nothing else, he is a top running back that will score you top points. And yes, you should be drafting him. However, I won't.
I completely agree. I think actually 13 is unlucky for fantasy at the moment because wide receiver 13 was Rashee Rice. ADP RB 13 is Josh Jacobs. And that's a really, really fair price for a player of Jacobs' caliber. From that point of view, say fantasy alone, I'd be very happy to take him there. Thinking about what we might get from the NFL is a slow process. Even once things kicks in, we always think about, it'll be next year until that ban kicks in as well. So I think he could well be a canny pickup. It's the same thing, though, as we've said about a number of players on the show. When we think about our different biases that we might have, I like to pick fantasy players I want to cheer on. And if it was to be proven that he was guilty of that, say, if he isn't, fair play. He's been through a very difficult time with false allegations, potentially. 100%. If he has done, I don't want to be rooting for someone like that. And that's a conversation about a number of players over the last few years. And no, it's probably not the best way to play fantasy and win games, but it's the way that I would choose to play that. We've had these conversations about certain players over the years, haven't we, Ed? Would you given what we know so far, obviously we are not legal experts by any means, would you be picking him up or not?
At the moment, very much I would still be drafting him. I'll wait for the verdict. He's as Mark said, he's an elite running back, and he's in the perfect situation in Green Bay. He's got that backfield all to himself. Marshawn Lloyd hasn't really threatened him at all, and he's the only person I really think in their running back stable who might. So yeah, he's an RB1. He's a 3-down back, and if I want to win my league, then and he's available at RB 13. I think he's, like you say, is great value at the moment. It is affected, of course, by what's going on. But yeah, at the moment, I'd still be all over Jacobs. I'm sorry, I'm maybe not as good a man as you two, but
you're not as judgmental as us, perhaps.
But yeah, down the line, I think we'll wait and see what happens.
Well, I think we have covered all bases absolutely perfectly there. So that is our rundown of what has been a busy week of news in the NFL with lots of fancy implications. We will be back in a couple of days to talk about some QB camp battles, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds. That's all from me, all from Ed, all from Mark. So all that remains to be said is bada bing, bada bye. We'll see you next time.